Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramsden. Today we continue our conversation with the CEO of the ODPM, Dr. Stephen Ramroop. Welcome back.
Nice to be back.
And we'll talk about the National Response Framework. Before we even get to that though, you have a heck of a job because you're obviously working in the background, organizing everything in the event that the worst happens, so we know what we're dealing with and what contingencies are in place. But part of your job is also communicating, that's
Yes.
the public. And to me, the Trinidad public is a strange creature. While they always seem to want to know something, they fly into a panic relatively easily
Yes.
and are prone to exaggerating whatever problem we're facing. So for example, when we had the prison break, all of a sudden you're hearing rumors about something happening in South and something happening in Central, and they were sort of snowballing until the agencies got into,
Yes.
said, listen, no, that's not happening, just stay calm. How difficult is it for you to manage the public's reaction?
That's difficult. The science of crisis communication, it has evolved. We learned a lot in emergencies of the past. We have a lot of experience at the ODPM. A number of our agents, our team members have gone for training in crisis communication. And myself, on behalf of the government, I have gone to Singapore. I've had many hours of training as a senior policy maker, as it were. And how do we say the things we're supposed to say? How do we understand the role of social media now, which is an evolving nightmare sometimes, but it's very good because there's positives and there's negatives in social media. How do you monitor social media and use it to your benefit? Because social media can now cause a lot of panic in a really quick time, as we realize.
Because it's
recently.
two-way. I mean,
Yes.
people can add things to something.
In seconds, you can cause a panic in a country because you say something which is not right, and then everybody hangs on. And human beings have a tendency also to look at, to tag on to those things. Crisis communication really involves a network of people who come together in a short space of time to say the right things at the right time to the right populations. That's basically, in a nutshell, what it's supposed to be. Coordination of that is also very important. Having the facts to tell people is also important. So the persons who are giving messages must be trained. The messages must be as factual as possible. And it must be understanding the fact of the risks of panic and understanding your population and the characteristics of your population. Who says what when is very important as well. And the science says that it has to be, in terms of communication, it's not that the ODPM has to say something. The ODPM has to make sure that the people who has to say something at the right time. And how it is said is very important, how the message is framed based on the science of crisis communication. You must have expertise in doing that. You cannot tell, unfortunately, you can't tell everyone everything, right, at a certain time. So that also needs training and expertise. Over the last 3 or 4 years, the ODPM has been working very closely with the communication agencies of both the public sector and the private sector. We have been having meetings with the chambers, we have been having meetings with different organizations within the ministries, all the different ministries. And what has evolved over a number of years has been what we call the information task group or the information group of persons. So that if, for example, you have an oil spill, the persons who come together are the public relations or communications persons from all the relevant agencies. If you have a landfill fire, that might be a little different to the oil spill agencies. If you have a shooting in Port of Spain, for example, the persons who come together are a little different to the oil spill or the tanker that collided in the highway. So the trick really is then to identify who are the key public relations or communications officers, right, who are involved in that particular impact. And then now, who actually speaks? Speaking to the population has to be what we call, it has to be done in a tiered manner, in a scaled manner. If it's a municipal event, it's something that is actually reserved to just a municipality or a village or a street. Under the Municipal Act, under the local government authority laws, then under the local laws, the responsibility of the burgesses rests with the chief executive officer of the municipalities. In Tobago, it comes under the Tobago House of Assembly. So one would clearly understand that and this is all over the world. If you go to major cities, you find that the mayor, right, his worship the mayor or her worship the mayor, they will make statements in a particular state or in a particular area, the governor for the state. So in the United States, each as you go up the levels, the tiers, the responsible politician will make the statements, but they are briefed by the technical persons at the level, and it is scaled up to government level. So when it's a national disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake or something, or even something simple in Port of Spain like a coup d'etat that affects the entire population, it has to be done by the state. It has to be done by the head of state or the head of government, whoever has the responsibility for speaking in that nation. And who briefs the head of state or the head of government in a national issue, who briefs the mayor in a municipal issue, those persons must have the ability to discuss it with the public relations and communications persons of the relevant ministries that are involved in the process. So if you have an oil spill, for example, in Cypria, clearly by the national crisis or the worldwide crisis communication best practice, right, and it is reserved to Cypria, then obviously if there was a mayor or a chairman of that corporation in that area, if the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs is the lead ministry for the oil spill, if the other public relations officers in the private companies that are responsible maybe for the oil spill, in the private entities, for example, in the Ministry of the People, because livelihoods will be affected, maybe there's fishing, so then you have the Ministry of Food Production. So if you look at it now, you bring these public relations officers very quickly, it's not rocket science, get them together, frame up a message, right? Look at the responsibility of each ministry, and then you make a statement. Who delivers the statement? If it is just confined to that municipality, obviously it's going to be either the chairman or the mayor of that corporation. Under the law, they should do that. So this is, and if you scale that up now, if you have an earthquake which affects 14 municipalities, you don't expect to have 14 statements from 14 chairmen or mayors.
And it would be a national level.
Obviously, it has to be a national statement.
But working against that, and that all makes perfect sense to me, and I'm going to use the prison break thing again recently because it's a good example we can all remember. There were a number of media houses that were broadcasting events as they occurred.
Yeah.
I was monitoring, I was actually off that day, so I was in the car between two of them. One of them, I'll say that one of them was CNMG.
Right.
That was, I thought, being very responsible. They were giving you the facts as they knew it and saying this is what we know is established right now.
Sure.
There's another media house that was talking about, we're hearing rumors that so-and-so.
Yes.
To me, the worst thing in the middle of a panic is to say we're hearing rumors, unless it's actually substantiated. Don't say it.
Yes.
So you're working against that.
Again, now one of the things is that you have to look at the science. I mean, what you're saying there has happened in many countries around the world. It's not something that is unique to Trinidad.
Once you have a free press,
that's
going to happen.
And you know, that is commendable. Now, what is also important, however, is for the state to identify that there is a time that a statement has to be made. You see, now this is where the trick comes in. If you have a serious incident like that in a situation where it's your commercial business district, there are a number of foreign interests in the country. You have large hotels. You have a business city is coming close to the end where people have to go home. It's not just a police issue. It is an issue that actually brings in a number of agencies. You see, private sector, the Ministry of Transport in terms of traffic management, Ministry of Works, Ministry of the Police Service, the ODPM in terms of civil protection, avoiding gridlocks in the cities. We have to work very closely with the officers that are involved in trying to not gridlock a city. The Ministry of Education, in fact, it's like schools, even the Ministry of Housing, responsibility for things like Hyatt and all of these people who are coming and going, even the Ministry of Transport in terms of airports and whether or not flights are going to let people come into the city or not. So you see, it's not just a simple problem, and you have to say something. Herein lies the problem. We are now developing as a country, because we are now understanding the big impacts that when we bring multiple agencies together. This is what the NOC has really that is what it has to evolve now. In other words, there's a 24-watt system. Before, when we didn't have an NOC, every agency would have done their own thing or not done their own thing. You see, and now that the NOC is not fully developed, it needs to have resources, it needs to have authority. Because right now, the police would have more authority than the NOC. And the police doesn't have to come and tell NOC, well, look, we're going to make a joint statement, because they can make it. They have the authority to do so. But Ministry of Works have the same authority. And Ministry of Tourism have the same authority. And everybody has the same authority. But when you don't have a legislation that allows the mandate to bring everything together and say, okay, what do you say? What do you say? Let us now frame a statement that has everybody's interest involved. And then you make a nice statement, properly worded, right? And then you have it in a very timely manner, right? And you give it at the right time. So you don't allow rumors to be circulated in the press. Initially, yes, you would have rumors, because that would be how you're going to reporting your news. But as it goes on, and I remember I talked about the timely manner, you have now to interject and say, okay, guys, We don't have all the facts at the moment, but yes, there's an incident that is occurring. We have met with all the key agencies. We want to assure you that you do not have to, to panic. But however, we are taking contingencies in terms of your evacuation of the city.
And that is what happened in that case, isn't it?
But it happened, sometimes it might happen too late.
But in terms of the ODPM, when events like that happen, do you do a post-mortem to see
Yes.
exactly where gridlock points were and how people
We
reacted?
have that. We know as part of the evacuation, in fact, just that morning of the shooting, we had the city of Port of Spain had a training session. In fact, and I was briefing and I had to give a little talk on the national response framework and the national plans for disaster management in the country. And of course, the evacuation plan for Port of Spain and the egress plan, they are very important in that entire plan for disaster management in the country. Very important. That's where our CBD is located. In Trinidad and Tobago, it's a very big city. So the evacuation of Port of Spain is an extremely high responsibility for the ODPM on our scorecard. And we have had many, remember I talked about in a previous program where we had a storm that was coming and there was a gridlock. We have had many instances in the past, even within this year, where there were gridlocks coming out of Port of Spain.
And we should mention, none of those were actually planned evacuations.
And this is correct. And now a planned evacuation might be a little better because you have time. But this is where the essence of learning comes in. Based on that, we know where our gridlocks are. We know in a short space of time, if you open up the bus route, it's going to be gridlocked because everybody will use the route. And as a matter of fact, we have found at the ODPM that the risks of opening up the bus route are probably more than just having the persons, channeled in a one-way direction using the other highways. When you look at television, for example, and you see evacuation of large cities in real, you will see that one of the highways don't have anybody in it. No cars, you'll just see emergency vehicles on that. And that is a science that has evolved coming up from civil protection agencies like us. Now, we can't go and tell the police to do that at this point in time. NOC can't tell the police or even Ministry of Works that you listen. What we need to do is that the incoming highway to Port of Spain must be only emergency vehicles, and the bus route must remain only for emergency
Why
vehicles.
doesn't the legislation allow the ODPM to do that? Because it seems to me as the umbrella organization, you would know what's best.
Yeah, well, and we know what is best, but as I said, we are not an organization that can mandate or actually facilitate any discussion legally at this point in time.
But you can still advise.
We can advise, and
but
that's
it's up
what
to them
we do.
to listen or not.
That's what we do. And therefore, what we are saying now is that I think the next stage in the NOC development, because when you talk NOC, you're also talking ODPM. Because remember, I intimated to you in a previous program that one of the components of NOC is civil protection, civil defense, and public safety, which is ODPM. So that you don't have to bring a health person in the NOC. You don't have to bring an airports authority person in the NOC. You don't have to bring someone from social services in the NOC, because that's what ODPM does. ODPM connects with all of those civilian authorities, right, and then brings it to the NOC, so that when we say, okay, we have already talked to health, we have already talked to them, about the health centers, we bring that to the table at the NOC. So when the NOC legislation became, and it's good now that it comes under the Office of the Prime Minister, because it makes it easier for the messages now to go directly to the head of government, right, and issue warnings or issue, statements, public warning information system, that now has to reside within the NOC system, because it is now with legislation that we can say, okay, police, okay, you have an incident, you deal with it, you have anything to say, Ministry of Works, we have some traffic issues that we want you to help with the police. The military, we know we might want you to help us. You know why? Because those intersections, they're going to be chaotic. And the police right now are involved in a little exercise down at the bottom of Port of Spain, so their resources might be low, so we need to. So this is where we're talking about coordination. So whilst you're talking about that, you haven't informed the public as yet that listen, this is happening, because you're now setting your resources in the right place, because fire is speaking to police is speaking to defense, everybody's speaking. So by the time we tell the people, okay, from now on, the bus route will only be for emergency vehicles. All the maxis will now go to your other routes, because although and the bus route should really be an emergency route. The maxis are using it now to transport people, but in an emergency in large cities,
that is the emergency artery
channel must only be for
right.
emergency vehicles. Could you imagine trying to save people in Port of Spain under the rubble when you have gridlocked your emergency route and you have gridlocked your incoming and outgoing? You see? And this is the time when severe, hard decisions have to be made. People have to go down to Diego Martin and say, you can't come into the city. People have to go to the north and the lady and say, listen, you just cannot come to the city. You have to go to Grand Bazaar and say, nobody's coming into the city for the next 2 hours. Find another route, go and stay. Because all we're doing now is we're emptying the city.
So all roads lead out of Port of Spain, except for emergency vehicles.
That's correct. You see, and I mean, this is the kind of thing that will clear that totally. And that is scientifically backed up. We know that because we are the ones who read what happened. We have books on what happened in Haiti. We go across the United States. We meet with technical people, military people. We sit down in courses in the Inter-American Defense College with our colleagues all around the Caribbean, in Latin America, who all share the same experiences. So we bring to the table that expertise, but we can't integrate that because right now we have no say in it legally. We can only advise, and we try our best, and it has improved. I wouldn't sit down here and say that it has not improved. In this current, I would say over the last 3 years, in this current time, we are very happy that the NOC is evolving, and ODPM plays a very integral role in the development of the NOC concept.
So perhaps we'll be seeing legislation coming up that will
I
give
think
more
it has
teeth
already
to the
been
ODPM.
developed. I think it's just a matter of time before people understand. I think a lot of problems is that people just don't understand what we are talking about. And I think that is a problem.
We have about 10 minutes left, which doesn't seem fair, but at least we can touch on the National Response Framework and what it's about.
Well, I mean, I think we have been talking about it in a sense.
In and around, yeah.
Because clearly what we are saying, if we use the incident that we talked about, and I would like to, I wouldn't want to say I want to reassure you, but I want to tell you that there will be incidents like that again. Mm-hmm. There will be situations in Port of Spain that will cause the same problem, maybe even this evening or tomorrow. That's just how it is. It's what happens in big cities.
Although I must say, when that event happened, I was leaving Port of Spain, because I was scheduled to leave in any case.
Yeah.
It took about an hour and 15 minutes to get to Central Trinidad, which to me wasn't that bad.
And I think a lot of work had been done with a number, when the statement started to come out, I must thank a lot of the media, because not all the media were actually, looking at it as, they were actually informing the people, and they were taking it upon themselves to say, well, look, hey guys, be careful. In fact, I even looked at one social media comment that was coming out from, one of the media houses. I said, listen, why don't you stagger your removal from the city? Don't all go on at the same time. If you want to go down to the west of the city, go down to the west of the city, lime a little bit, and then wait a little bit, give it about a couple of hours, and then head out. Because if everybody head out at the same time, then the same 2 hours that you're going to be spending in the mall or in the movie town watching a movie or something is the same 2 hours you're going to be sitting in traffic in a gridlock. Mm-hmm. And I think when we start to have a proper system of coordination, when we now say, well, okay, we have made a decision at the level of the NOC, we have all the key agencies here, we have communicated with the public relations officers of the key ministry, this is what we would like you to do. We would like you, if you're east of Charlotte Street or you're south of, in Independence Square, whatever it is, we want you to move to the west of the city. We want you to hold there until the authorities give you the okay to move.
How do you get the information out, though? Because is it through the standard media? I know you also have the text messaging capability.
We have a dedicated emergency channel which can be used. In other words, then we have the ability through the Telecommunications Authority and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. We can actually the government can actually have a channel which overrides every other channel and say, well, this is a message from the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
So the emergency broadcast system in the US.
Okay. We do have that. We also have the ability to communicate with key institutions. For example, the Ministry of Energy has a whole network of private security agencies. So a lot of the initial work has to be done with what we call the group alerting system. All your policemen on the shifts, all your military officers on the shift, all your fire officers on the shift, all your ambulance services on the shift, all your school principals, all your business organizations. And this is why we still have to sit down with the chambers, we have to sit down with the Port of Spain business, San Fernando, Scarborough, Arima. This is where the biggest gap lies, where ODPM, right, coordinating this sort of group alert system with the civil protection responsibility. You see, we are very much trying to bring down crime. We're very much trying to reduce drugs into the country. So a lot of focus has been on border security, homeland security, hard-level security. But evidence has shown that if you increase your civil protection and your civil defense and your public safety, the country evolves into a highly resilient society that actually watches out for each other. In certain countries, I can tell you, if you go to unzip your pants and try to urine on a plant, within 5 minutes, there's a squad car there. They
I mean,
didn't
that's
have a
what
camera
Singapore,
then.
yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? So, I mean, that is to tell you, we haven't reached there yet. We are a young nation. I mean, people forget that too. People look at the news and see a lot of developed countries with all these fancy systems, a lot of, good social fabric, which looks after each other. But we are a young nation. We still have about 150 years to reach some of these nations. Not that we're saying we have to wait that long. But again, we have to understand that we are young people in terms of the whole concept of bringing people together. Systems, obviously, we don't have to go and reinvent the systems. They're there. So that we have to take the NOC understanding. We have to meet with our business people. We have to create groups that they have to share that information. Sharing of information is one of the biggest challenges that ODPM has detected over in the last few years. People just hold information to themselves and they're not willing to share it. People with very good information, we can't get it. Right now, for example, we can't get the census information from 2010 because they are locked up in a building south of Port of Spain that we have no access to. And we need to go and get that data because that is very important data to tell us where vulnerable people are, which is the last census that tells me where my disabled persons are. Right now, ODPM has been trying to get it, but we understand that from the ministry that is responsible that they can't have access to that information because it's locked away in a building in south of Port of Spain because I think there was some problems with the building, so they close all the information in that building.
And therefore, you have no access to data that is critical,
That data,
mission critical data. Yeah.
those data are critical. It's critical because that is what's going to help us with it. We are now working with 2000 census, 2010 census data. We had some initial CDs with it. We are trying to use that as much as possible. But data, I'm not even accusing anybody here. I'm just saying that one of the traditional problems we have had in countries like Trinidad and Tobago, is a lot of that in the Caribbean islands as well, is that certain data sets are required to be shared. So we have to develop a system of authority and who gets what. I mean, clearly, if you go to many big countries or developed countries, there are clearances. I have a clearance level 4, I'm allowed to get this data. If you have a clearance level 1, you just can't access that data. This is some of the problems we're having with leakage of information from public sector, where very pertinent documents are finding itself in newspapers and on social media. Why? Because we definitely need to create levels of authority and clearance. Certain people just cannot get access to certain documents. And that has to be embedded in our public service because that's one of the problems with the public service.
And that's a system that you mentioned is at work around the world. We have different levels of clearance, and it makes perfect sense. I really need to get it going here.
That's correct.
As you've headed into the last 4 minutes or so, I have to ask you, is the ODPM adequately resourced right now, or could you use, given the scope of the work you have to do, could you use more?
Well, the answer to that is definitely yes. I mean, we have resources. We have been very, very thankful to the government. I mean, we are a government agency, and we have actually had to sort of sit into a ministry that has a lot of other very high priority issues. And I think that has been good and it has been bad. But what has happened is that we have been able to broker a relationship with our police service colleagues, our fire service colleagues, our immigration colleagues. So we have a very good network within the National Security Ministry. So although we may not have optimal resources, it is easy for us to take a phone call and say to the Commissioner of Police or the Chief of Defense, "Sir, I have a problem with some vehicles, can you help us?" And I think that is the kind of relationship we have. We have mutual resources, and those resources will be probably much better realized when we have a major impact. The problem really is when we don't have a major impact, when people will hold their resources to do what they have to do. And I think that is probably affecting us a little bit, but I know for sure, and I can assure the nation, that should we have an impact that impacts people at a significant extent, then you would find it is much more streamlined. The actual decisions that will be made for evacuation and egress of Port of Spain will be more focused than it used to be, because that level of disaster, as it were, would allow us to have a little more authority, as it were, right? Even if it's not legal, it's still embedded in our Disaster Measures Act, because the President at that time, on the advice of the Prime Minister and the National Security Minister and the National Security Council, can then advise who the authority is. So although it's an old, outdated legislation which we are trying to change, the Disaster Measures Act, in it is embedded the need for an authority to deal with the issue. And I'm hoping that at this time, the executive arm of government will realize that it will be ODPM should we have a national disaster.
I guess the ODPM really to some extent is like an insurance policy, isn't it? And unfortunately, when some people are facing a tight budget, they will choose not to insure something, hoping that nothing bad happens in the interim.
And that happens, but you know what?
As you mentioned, we're lucky we haven't had any major disasters.
But we take advantage of the situations where there have been impacts. For example, Diego Martin, we were able to get the 511 system up and running. Because prior to that, we had made requests for the 511, and it was just it wasn't really appreciated. But when the Diego Martin incident occurred, people saw the need to have an emergency 511 system, which was not a call-in, it was not a 911 system. Right? We want one system called a 911. 511 is not intended to take out from a 911 system, but even when there's a 911, and the 911 operator takes the call for an accident on the highway, for example, where the vehicle is burning, where the vehicle is causing a massive pileup, you need police and fire and ambulance. But you get one call. You call 911 in other states. So when you call 911, at the same instant, there's a dispatch by police, fire, and ambulance. You don't call 3 agencies like what is happening now in Trinidad.
Which I find so bizarre that
So
we
we
still
have
an
to
old
have a
system.
911 system. But then that doesn't mean that the call center for fire and the call center for ODPM doesn't remain. It's just that you channel it through 911.
You literally patch the call through.
That's correct, and that is what I'm saying. So therefore, I think that understanding has not, we at the ODPM have been trying to share that. There's no need to, millions of dollars have been spent to build up systems in fire and the police and 811 for ambulance, 211 in Tobago, 511 in Trinidad. So you don't need to go and have a new 911 with all the agencies in one room. You just have to have proper IT monitoring so that the calls are patched simultaneously. So if there's a bee problem or a house going down a river, that's not a fire problem. That's not a police problem. It's not an ambulance problem. It's an ODPM problem to bring the agencies together.
Well, Dr. Stephen Ramroop, we're out of time again. Kind of shocking, but we'll be continuing our conversation in future programs.
Sure.
I thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
A great pleasure. Thank you very much. You've been watching 1-on-1. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.